Okay, so I'm gonna. Well, I would always show you the cover, but for some reason the computer doesn't work that well. This is a Harlequin Desire best-selling author from the New York Times list, Maisey Yates. Bonus story is included, two great books in one. The Claiming the Rancher's Heir, Gold Valley Vineyards. And let me just tell you, it was one of the best books ever. Now, here's the back. I won't try to be so reading into the romantic parts, which is the desirable parts. We might have children watching, so you got to keep it, PG. Arrogant, infuriating, insufferable, and yet he's the sexiest man she's ever met. When Wren Maxfield hates Creed Cooper, but now she's working with a wealthy rancher over the holidays. Those strong feelings hide undeniable chemistry, and one wild night results in pregnancy. Now Creed vows to claim his heir. That means proposing a marriage in name only. But as desire takes over, is that a deal that they can keep? Oh, I gotta tell you, this book was outstanding. I did not paperclip anything. I have not had time to paperclip anything. So me, myself, and I am looking for like little stars where I have marked to share with you. And I just reached the first star. I just got to find out where. Okay, page 12. And I'm going to mark as we go, which is rather unique, right? That way I can tell you which pages I shared with people here. Okay, maybe not just as much, but he loved that he got to her. Fantastic. As you know, things at Maxfield Vineyards are changing. My father is no longer the owner. Instead, my sister Emerson, her husband Holden, and our sister Cricket, and I now have ownership. This plan is Emerson's idea, to be clear, as she is the person who oversees our broader brand. She waved a hand in the air as if to distance herself yet further from whatever she was about to say. I had to defer to her on the subject. She doesn't think a rivalry is beneficial for any of us. She thinks we should join forces. A large-scale event where both our wines are represented. As you know, wine tours and the whole wine trail in general have become increasingly popular. A rising tide lifts all boats and gets more people drunk, basically, she said. I'm not really sure I see the benefit to me, he said, seeing as everything is going well here. Everyone wants to expand, she said, looking at him as if he had grown a second head. Do they? Yes, she responded, everyone. The way I see it, it's our business is running well. We have the right amount of staff. Every family member has a position in the company, and it supports us very well. At a certain point, rent more and is more, and that's it. She looked at him, clearly dumbfounded. There were very definite and obvious differences between the Cooper and the Maxwell families. The Coopers might be wealthy, but they liked their winery to reflect their roots, down home, Western flair. In the early days, his father had been told that there was no way he would ever be successful unless he did something to class up his image. He had refused. Digging in deeper to the cowboy theme was ultimately why they had become so successful. There was no point in competing with fancy pants places like the Maxfields. It just wasn't the Coopers' way. Joining up with the Maxfields made even less sense than trying to emulate them, in his opinion. Come on, she said. You're ambitious, Creed. Don't pretend otherwise. And that was where she might have had him, because he didn't like to back down from a challenge. In fact, he quite liked a challenge in general. That was his ensuing one now made him wonder if she was just baiting him, taunting him. He wasn't even sure if he cared. All he knew was that he instantly wanted to take her up on it. There was something incredibly sexy about the comment to knowing her enemy. What exactly are you proposing? I want to have a large event, all of the wineries in the area, a wine festival for Christmas. That's ambitious, and it's way too early to talk about Christmas. All the stores would disagree, Creed. Twinkling lights are out and about. Ask me if I care. I'd like to do a soft launch large party at the Maxwells in the next month, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. We'll invite our best clients. Can you imagine the buzz that will be joining forces? Oh, you mean because everybody knows how profoundly our families dislike each other. It wasn't a secret. They were never civil to each other. They never even tried to be. Yes, she said, that. And how exactly do you think we're going to get through this without killing each other? She looked all cheerfully and innocent. Look on the bright side. If I do kill you, I get to dance on you. You'll get that dance that you always wanted so badly. Well, a silver lining to every cloud, I guess. I like to think so. Are you in? The only thing worse than giving in to the attraction he had for her would be hurting a business opportunity for it. He didn't let other people control him, not in any way, and least of all, not Wren Maxfield. Hold on. I gotta mark this page here. We went to 12, 13, this is 14. And that meant he'd do it, no matter how much he'd rather roll up in a pit of honey and lie down an anthill. How's this going to work logistically? I'm not going to roll up to your event in a suit. I didn't think you would. I thought you might be able to bring your rather rustic charm. The way she said rustic and charm implied that she felt the former did not go with the latter. He smiled. It does go with me wherever I go. Do you have to wear a hat? She wrinkled her nose. That is non-negotiable, he said, reaching up and flicking the cowboy hat brim up with his forefinger. I figured as much. She sniffed. Well, I can accept that. You have no other choice. We'll provide the food, barbecue. You really don't have to do that. I am not standing at a fancy party with nothing but raw fish on a cracker to eat. And anyway, if you want my clients, you better have meat. With wine? Hey, we work hard to break that stereotype that cowboys only drink beer. I myself enjoy a nice red with my burger. Unacceptable. His glare flicked over her curves, and he was just wrapped up in her looks. Okay, sugarcoating it. Too repressed to handle a little change, Wren? Color flooded her cheeks. Rage. I am not. I just don't like terrible ideas. It's not a terrible idea. It's on brand, he said with the last bit of no small amount of self-deprecation and a smirk. Whatever. I don't care that what you like with what. Really, I just want to know if I can count on your help to get me through this. Help to put this together. You just got it. I look forward to this new venture, she said, smiled, which was strange, and then she extended her hand. He only looked at it for a moment, then he reached his own out and clasped hers and shook it. Her skin was soft like he had known it would be. Wren was the kind of woman who never done a day's worth of manual labor in her whole life. Not that she didn't work hard, she did. And he knew enough about her inner workings of a job like theirs to be well aware that it took a hell of a lot of mental energy. It was just that he also worked on his own ranch when he wasn't working on the wine part of things. And he also knew that his own hands were rough as hell. She was too soft, too cosseted, snobby, uppity, repressed, unless she was giving him the dressing down with all of those evil tongues of hers. And damn, he liked it all, as much as he hated it. The thing was, even if he'd been a different man who had a heart, the thing was, even if he'd been a different man who had the heart it took to be with someone forever, to do the whole marriage and kids thing, if he'd been a man who hadn't destroyed that a long time ago, it wouldn't be her. Couldn't be her. A kick of lust shot through him, and igniting the point where their hands still touched, Wren dropped her hold of him quickly. Well, good. I guess we'll be seeing a lot more of each other then. I guess we will. Looking forward to it. And that's how we're kicking off Claiming the Rancher's Heir. We're going to page 22 right now. You agreed to do what? Creed looked at his older brother Jackson, who had an expression on his face suggested that Creed might have said he'd planned to get out of the wine business and start raising corgis rather than just coordinating an event with the Maxfield family. You heard me the first time, Creed said. What's the point of that? They're a bunch of bleep holes. Normally, Creed would not have argued or even felt the inclination to argue, but for some reason he thought back to Wren's determined face and the way she looked in that dress, and he felt a bit defensive. You know the girls are running it now, he said. James Maxwell absolutely was a blank hole, and I agree with you, but things are different now. They're running things differently. Right, so you suddenly kissed and made up with Wren Maxfield? The idea of kissing Wren sent a lightning bolt and pleasure straight down. Can't believe I marked to read that, so we're going to move forward. And the idea of making up with her made his gut churn. Not a Dang chance, Creed responded. So the two of you are going to do this while at each other's throats the entire time? The logistics aren't exactly your concern. The logistics are my concern as always, so you just be a silent partner. Creed narrowed his eyes. You're awfully loud for a silent partner. I'm not technically a full-on silent partner, Jackson said. It's just that I would rather invest my money than make decisions. So then I'm letting you know what the plan is. Creed thought back to the moment when he told Wren that he was going to be having the barbecue. Now he had to barbecue. We all have to bring some grills. I'm not even going to ask. Fine with me. I'm sorry, what are we planning? Their younger sister, Honey, walked into the room. She was named by their mother, who had been thrilled to have a daughter, and after having two sons, that decided that her daughter was sweet, and needed a name suggested so. Honey had retaliated by growing into a snarky tomboy who had never seen the use for a dress and didn't know which end of a tube of lipstick to use. He'd always been particularly fond of his sister. An event with a Maxfields, Jackson said. Her mouth dropped open. Are you out of your mind? I asked him that already, Jackson grunted. Well, ask again and then check him for brain damage. No more brain damage than I already had, Creed said. Then why are we doing this? Honey asked. Because, he said, taking a moment to chew on the words that were about to come out next, because they hurt. Wren had a point. She thinks we should join the wineries together. Make this area more of a tourist destination for wine trails and things like that, and there's no point in being competitive when we can advertise for each other. People like to try all different kinds of wine and experience all the different atmospheres when they're on vacation. You sound like a brochure, Jackson said. He probably did, mostly because Wren had sounded like one and he was basically repeating her. Well, that's a good thing, Creed said, since we need some new brochures and somebody has to write them. It isn't going to be either of you. True, Honey said cheerfully. You do have to help me barbecue, and you have to help set up this party. I need you, the two of you there, if for no other reasons than to be my witnesses. Witnesses to what? Jackson said. Just in case Wren decides to murder me. You could take her, Honey said. Yeah, he could take her, and that was for dang sure, but not in the way his sister meant. You know, I would never hurt a lady. That's far too gallant if the lady is willing to be murdering you, Honey said pragmatically. You could try and be less annoying, Jackson said. Look, Creed said, she came to me, so it's up to her to behave herself. I didn't go to her, and I wouldn't have. Though, truth be told, he would have to behave himself, too. The prospect of spending extra time with Wren Maxfield was definitely problematic. And he'd spent the next 5 years not touching her. A few weeks working in close proximity shouldn't be an issue. Hell, they wouldn't be. Because when Creed Cooper decided something, he stuck to it. Control was what he was all about. He might be a rich cowboy who could have anything he wanted, but he didn't mean he did have everything he wanted. Not anymore. Not after he had experimented with a disastrous consequence of that kind of behavior. He had learned his lesson, and he would never make that same mistake he made as a kid. That was for damn sure. Okay, we're on to chapter 2 already. Isn't this exciting? Marking as I go. Okay. For as long as Wren could remember, her life had been on a steady course. Everything had been the same. From the time she was a child, she had known she would work for the Maxfield Vineyards. And the only real question that had been in what capacity. Emerson's contribution had been based on her strengths, which she was a social media wizard, but that was not something anyone could have anticipated, considering the medium hadn't existed in the same form when they were younger. But Wren had always had a talent for hospitality. She had always been able to make people feel at ease. Even when everything had been going well in her parents' marriage, from the outside looking in, there had been that invisible band of tension in the house. The tension that had ever been worse when they were dealing with the Coopers. Whatever the reason, her father hated that family, and he instilled a hefty dose of that dislike in her, though Creed had taken a dislike to a personal level. Even so, Wren was an expert on managing tension and making everything seem like it was okay. Delightful even when it was decidedly less so. Even when she and Creed wanted to dismember each other, they could both do their jobs. She imagined that was why he was in the same position in his family company, the same as she always was in hers. Event planning and liaising with the other companies in a personal way to create heightened brand recognition was something that she excelled at, but it had also been the only real surprise in her entire life, apart from when James Maxfield had been utterly and completely disgraced. Yes, that was the real first time her life had taken an unexpected turn. She still wasn't sure how she felt about it. On one hand, her father was clearly a monster, and having never been emotionally close with him, not in the way Emerson had been, it would devastate Wren. But it did leave her feeling adrift. Now she was drifting into uncharted territory with this cowboy wine partnership, and she truly did not know how she felt about that either. But it was happening, so there wasn't much to be done about it. In fact, she was meeting with Creed this morning. The two of them were going to be talking logistics and deciding wines to feature. They wanted to showcase a broad spectrum of what each wine label did best, while not stepping on each other's toes. Unusual, since she generally were deliberately going head to head. But now they weren't. Another unusual thing in a slew of unusual things. She got into her shiny sports car and pulled out of the grand circular drive that led to a top of the mountain where the family home set. She took the drive all the way down to the road, and she put the distance between herself and the villa. She was surprised to realize the pressure she hadn't been noticed building in her chest began to get lighter and lighter. And that shouldn't be what was happening. She should be feeling more and more stressed the closer she got to Creed. It didn't track with what she knew to be true about herself. That she loved her family and her life and hated him. She mused about what she was maneuvered her car down the winding 2-lane road through the picturesque main street of Gold Valley, Oregon. Her family had been based here all of her life, but she'd always felt somewhat separate from it. She and her sisters had gone to boarding school on the East Coast, coming back to Oregon for summers. All the men she dated had been back east, long-distance relationships that had become inconvenient and annoying over time. But most of those men had been like her, educated in the same kind of institutions, from family like her own. In fact, in those groups, often she was among the poorest, hilarious of all things considered. But what made her feel somewhat out of place, she didn't go out drinking at Gold Valley saloons, a favorite watering hole of most people who lived here. And I didn't mark a spot to stop. So we're going to start where she pulls into the drive, and she gets greeted by him, and he's like, "Howdy, ma'am," and she's like, "What's up, idiot?" Being nice, changing the words. She crossed her arms, mirroring his own posture. "I thought you were supposed to be a lady." "That's the thing. I know how to behave like a lady in the right venue. I also know how to go toe-to-toe with anyone. Byproduct of my private school education." "Rich people, you mean?" "Well, you're certainly mean." She shifted uncomfortably. "Not always." She didn't know why she felt compelled to strike at him constantly. Why had they slipped into this space of open hostility with such ease? "You don't know?" is what she's thinking. Okay, maybe she had a fair enough idea, but she didn't want to marinate on it, not at all. "Just to me, aren't I special?" He moved away from the door and allowed her entry into the tasting room. "Isn't this nice? You didn't answer my question." "You're certainly something," she responded. The answer seemed to be settled between them rather than striking immediate sparks, but left an odd note of lingering in the air. They just stared at each other for a long moment, and it was like everything in the air around them was elastic, stretched, and then held tight. I'm going to leave you with how they met there, because it does get a little passionate because it's in the desire part. Okay. Now they're discussing what they want at the kind of celebration, if you will. On page 34, "A dunk tank? Absolutely not. It's happening in October." "That is your problem, Wren. If you can't think outside the box, you want to bring two labels together historically that have never had anything to do with each other. You want to bring together two very different types of people. The kinds of people that are at my winery do not want bouncy castles or children running around anywhere. Oh, they want the perfect little Stepford children, just like all of you were." The irritation twisted in her stomach. "You don't know me. You don't know us." Don't I? You're proving that I do. You're all worried about appearances here, like you've always been, when this whole thing with your daddy should have taught you that appearances don't mean much of anything. How dare you?" She was trembling now, irritation turning to total outrage. "How dare you bring my father into this? It was just too easy. I've been through enough. We've all been through enough. I don't need you flinging things at me about my family that I can't control. You want to talk about living in a box? You've never even left here, have you? We both know that's not true. A fair amount of my travel is required to do my job. But did you even go to college?" she asked. "No," he responded. "I was too busy working to build a family label. I guess you think attending college makes you smarter than me, but all it means is you were from a different sort of family. You see, we are not from money, not like you. You think that makes you better, but it doesn't. Because you know what else? My dad never sexually harassed a woman either, unlike yours. Rage poured through her, and she fought to keep from showing just how mad he made her. He was doing it on purpose, and he didn't deserve the satisfaction of knowing that he succeeded to get to her." "Where is your damn wine cellar?" she asked. "I want to go look in it and see what else you have." "You don't want to keep having this conversation?" "I never wanted to start having it," she said, each word coming out in a monotone, because if she had allowed her voice to amp up, she was going to say something she would regret. Not that there wasn't much she could say in anger that she would regret having a spat out at a creed, but it wasn't the anger that scared her, it was everything that hummed underneath it, that it could still hum underneath when she was so infuriated with him, when he was being such an unrepentant idiot. "Wine cellars this way," he said. He led the way back to the barn, where the staircase that led straight down. She was reluctantly charmed by it, by the uneven rock walls that gave the vague feel of a French country home, the thick uneven slabs of wood that made up the staircase making it feel like old world and resonant. She was irritated. She didn't hate it. She was irritated that he had homed in on that exact thing about herself that was bothering her at that moment. That he managed to poke at her exact point of insecurity, all the things she had been thinking of when she was driving into town, about how there was this whole other life here, a whole life in general that she was never even considered living because she was a Stepford child. It was exactly what she had been. Going where her father had chosen for her to go, growing exactly into what he wanted her to grow into, taking the job he had given her, and she was still doing it all the exact same things she had done before her father had gone away, before he stepped down from the company in disgrace. And it makes her wonder, what creature had she been fashioned into, and for whom? She didn't think there was an alternative reality where she would be in favor of a bouncy castle at her event. She truly didn't even know. She could only speculate. Everyone is a product of their circumstances. Don't be so hard on yourself, she's thinking. She nearly nodded at that affirmation she was giving herself. The problem was she couldn't agree, because she wasn't actually ever all that hard on herself. She never made any mistakes, not in the way that she thought of mistakes, because she had, always without fail, done exactly what she had been charged with by your father. And still, her father had never been effusive about his pride in her. But she had lived it for that praise, because who didn't? Who didn't want to make their father happy? And her father was. He was a monster. All those kinds of thoughts and those feelings absolutely had completely off kilter, and what she was only serving make her angrier at Creed. How could she handle all of this stuff and him? How dare he cut so close to the bone? He didn't know her. He didn't have any right to say the things he said, say the things that made her feel even more than anything anyone in her family ever said. That was for sure. "So the Cooper family is all just rainbows and butterflies?" she asked, as they made through the aisles of the wine. "And horse crap," he said. "Which wines were you thinking?" "I don't know. Pick something good." "The array of wine upstairs is good," he said. "That's why I picked them." Something different. She felt difficult, and she didn't care. "Rainbows and butterflies," he I can't say this word, irritated. "And my dad's not a criminal. And all of you work here at the family winery because you just love each other so much. Is that difficult for you to believe?" It wasn't, not really. There was a reason she was choosing to stay at the Maxfield winery, after all. A reason that went beyond just being afraid to start over, or not knowing what else she could do. Emerson was her rock, and Cricket needed her. "I'm close with my sisters," Wren said. "I love them. And I love my family. You ought to love your family. I'm just saying I'm not in a box. I just know who I am." Those words had never felt less true. Not that she really loved her family. She did love her family. It was just that right now she felt like she was wearing a Wren suit, and somewhere inside was a different creature. She felt like she was inhabiting The wrong body, the wrong space. Honestly, Wren, if you believe that, you wouldn't be so bound and determined to try and convince me. You don't know me. You're not my friend. Something we can agree on. You don't get to say what I know or don't know. You just don't. Too late. I did. You're such a... Well, you're just ridiculous. Just take a bottle of wine so we can get on with this, and I'll feel better a lot dealing with you if I'm drunker. This isn't exactly a picnic for me either, she said. You are without a doubt the most insufferable man I've ever known. You don't like me, Wren? He asked, taking a step toward her. How will I ever survive? The same way you always do, I imagine, she said, high on an unearned sense of self-confidence and a little testosterone poisoning. He huffed. You like it, he said. I'm sorry, what? You like it, my testosterone. You like to be poisoned by it, admit it. That's the sense of unearned self-confidence, she said, and her heart was hammering steadily against her chest. Right on time. It's not unearned. I watch you when we fight. Your face get all flushed. That's called anger. Why? What is it about me that makes you so damned angry? You are just a useless, base ape. Base? He asked the question with a dangerous sort of softness to his voice that made her tremble. That's what you think? That I'm some animal who can't control himself? Yes, she spat. I know all about you and your reputation. You get drunk at a bar. You pick up women every night of the week. I don't get drunk, he said. That's not me. Maybe that's not how you see yourself, but it's not what I hear. I hear that you are just a big, dumb, blunt instrument. You might go on and on about how you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, but your daddy made all this happen. You might wear a cowboy hat, but there's a silver spoon in your mouth just the same as mine. So don't you go dare acting like you're better than me just because you can't be bothered to put 1 ounce of refinement, because you don't have the manners to leave my dad out of this conversation, just because you can't be bothered to try to be a civilized human being. Isn't that a good one? I love that fight. And yes, it's more passion, but we're not going to hit the passion. I want you to read the passion and the burning desire. Going forward, this is just to wet your whistle and to really list off some great points in this book that I thought needed brought home. And I'm trying to find the next star page. I can't believe we're going several pages here without a star. Thank you for staying so patient while I'm still searching for our next star. It's got to be close. Here we go, 106. She took a breath and then she sat down at one of the tables. Okay, go get a notebook. Let me take you up to speed. These two have been intimate several times. They can't seem to stay away from each other. It's like once they lit the flame of desire, it overtook them. And so now she's expecting a child. He has proposed marriage. She doesn't want marriage. But now they're going to make a list of basically what it would take for them to get through this together. What? Get a notebook. We're going to write out what we both need, what we both expect, Creed. We are not going to make it through this if we don't trust each other. I can understand that you want a marriage in a legal sense. If you need that, I can give it to you. But during this pregnancy, that does not mean have to mean anything like it's not going to live where we need to live with each other or be in any kind of relationship until the baby's born. You think that, huh? I do, she said. I think we need to focus on putting our child first, but we need to build some sort of trust with each other. I would not take your baby from you, Creed, but I understand why you don't just take my words at face value. I'm not going to suffer for it either. I just found my life. I just found my purpose. Everything in my world got turned upside down when my dad... I had to rethink everything. Everything I believe in. Everything that I am. I'm not giving everything up just for you. Sorry. He looked hollow, almost helpless, and that made her stomach drop to her feet. I can't bend on this, he said. She looked at him, and she knew he was telling the truth. His face was drawn and haggard. His tone was tortured. I know you can't. I'm going to bend as much as I can right now so we can find some place where we can meet. He stood and left the room for a moment, then returned with a pen and a notebook. He thrust it into her hand. All right, start listing your demands. First of all, if you want to be involved, you need to be involved. It's really important to me that you're either hands-on or hands-off with our child, all in or all out." She looked at him. Her jaw was set, her posture determined. "Why is that?" "Because I won't have any of this lukewarm BS. That's how my dad was. He was just there enough to make us a family, try to perform for him, try to make us do the very best we could do to please him, but he never gave us anything back, not really. I'm not going to put my kid through that. I want more for them." "I want everything," he said. His voice was rough. "I lost 18 years with my son. I'm not losing any more time. I'm not losing that ever again. I won't ask you to, and I promise that's why my next thing is no more boom boom." "Are you out of your damn mind?" "No, I'm absolutely in my mind. We need to be able to deal with each other, and with this I need to be able to have you at my house. You need to be able to be around for whatever you want, whenever you feel you need to have time with our child. If we have our own feelings in the way of our situation, then this isn't going to work. We need to be able to be in the same room and not fight, and not, well, you know, the other F word, and what we seem to be so fond of." He snorted. "If we had that kind of control, we wouldn't be in this situation. But you, as well as I do, know that getting out of control isn't going to work. It just wouldn't. It couldn't. We have to make this list and stick to it so we can give each other what we need. And I don't think we can do that unless we get all this emotion involved. Is that what you think? Well, don't you? Don't you think it's too big of a risk?" His face went hard neutral, and then finally, "You're right. And really, it's all just a little control, which is I've had plenty of until you." "Well, that's just flattering, but I don't doubt you can find it again." "Sure, what else?" "Holidays," she asked. "Together, obviously, at my family's place," he said. "Always with his family. Was he kidding? But the child was currently a zygote, so as pressing matters went, she wasn't going to, that wasn't a huge one. Okay, I think we can actually wait on that." "Marriage," he said, "for the first year." "Until the baby is born," she said. "I'll give you that. Marriage until the baby is born, so you can be sure that you have your legal protection. And then we all can work out whatever custody agreement you want. We can cohabitate, whatever. But if the primary concern is custody, and you making sure that you have all your parental rights, I'll go that far. I can deal with that for now. Let's go get marriage license then," Creed said, fully and completely matter-of-factly, as if they'd worked everything out. "What, right now?" "Do you have a better time frame?" "I don't. I wasn't exactly thinking of a time frame. But I'm like 6 weeks pregnant, Creed. We can chill out." "Nope," he said. "It may have escaped your notice, Wren, but I don't have any chill." "It didn't escape my notice at all. Nothing about you suggests that you have chill." But he was already gathering his things. He was ushering them both out the door and toward his truck. "I can't. We're just going to get a marriage license. This is not Vegas. We can't just get married the same day. We need to figure out all the specifics." She made an exasperated sound and got into the truck behind him as they drove to town, and she was completely and utterly overwhelmed by this out-of-body sensation. Because surely this wasn't actually happening to her. She wasn't really going down to the courthouse to get a marriage license with a man who irritated her more than... "You don't even like me," she said. "I'm not pretending to like you." That shut her up, because it was true. He wasn't pretending to like her. He wasn't pretending that they were actually anything other than a legal practicality. And that was how she found herself standing in front of a clerk's desk in an old brick courthouse, filling out the forms. "They could get married 3 days after the license was purchased. Then we'll get married in 3 days," Creed said. She didn't reply or say anything until they finished signing off all the papers. But then when they walked back outside the courthouse and was walking on the sidewalk down the main street, heading back to where they had parked the truck, she gave him the evil eye. "You have to be joking. 3 days?" He lifted a shoulder. "You want a hamburger?" "Do I look like I want a hamburger?" Her stomach growled. She frowned furiously at it. She did, in fact, want a hamburger. "I think you do," he said. "Let's go to the mustard seed." "You don't know what I want more than I do, Creed Cooper," she growled, trailing along after him as abruptly coursed and heading to the smallest diner. "I'm pretty good at anticipating what it is you want, Wren Maxfield." And there's some snide remarks there that are adorable between the two. Again, I want you to read this book. Let me see here. They're at the diner now, and she's asking him, "Do you come here often?" Yes, he answered, my favorite burger place. Oh, a waitress who looked like she was probably the same age as Wren had been the last time she'd come into this place approached the table. Chocolate milkshake, Creed said. Cheeseburger, extra onion, and French fries. I'll have a Diet Coke and a cheeseburger and sweet potato fries. They sat there staring at each other across the small table. He was her fiancé. A hysterical bubble of laughter welled up in her throat. What? He asked. Well, of all the ways that I imagined getting engaged, it wasn't being dragged down to the courthouse to sign papers and then being taken out for dinner for a burger. All right, I imagine you figured it would come with something fancy. And a diamond. Do you want a diamond? She suddenly had an image of him getting down on one knee, sliding a ring onto her finger, and that felt too close to real. And the feeling in her chest was far too tender. No, she said, a diamond won't be necessary. So what do you think this is going to be? In name only, she responded. You want legal protection, and I'm sure we could manage that without a marriage. I can appreciate the fact that this is maybe the simplest route, and that's fine with me. We're going to be having a baby together. I'm not going to act like this is somehow going to bond us together in a way that it isn't, she sighed heavily. It's weird, though, because I never certainly expected to be starting a family without being really married, and I never expected I'd be with you. My brother seems to think it was inevitable. The baby? No, the events leading up to the baby. My sister seemed to think that as well. Well, what do you know? He asked, smiling ruefully. A few minutes later, their food arrived, and Wren realized how hungry she was, and the food was amazing. She was mentally castigated herself for any snobbery that had kept her away from a burger of this caliber. Okay, good suggestion, she said. Moving forward. Okay. He looked down at her hard. So do you think this is going to be a name and only marriage? Is that what it means to change your mind? You think it's all right if we sleep with other people? Well, we can't sleep with each other, she pointed out. Right, because you seem to think that's unreasonable. I do. It will only cause problems. I don't know what kind of marriage your parents had, but my parents' marriage was a disaster. It's only gotten worse as time has gone on. You know, for obvious reasons, you and I don't have a great relationship. It's weird. It's a relationship, all the fighting. It's not personal. I think we can be okay. I think we can make something out of this and be good parents, and I have a lot more confidence in our ability to do that if we keep it simple. So again, you now think it's all right for us to sleep with other people during this year-long marriage. Discomfort rolled through her in something like sadness. Well, I'm not going to be sleeping with anyone. Well, why not? She stared at him. I'm pregnant, not exactly going to go out and find a new lover while I'm gestating a human being. I can't imagine anything less sexy. He lifted a shoulder. A lot of men like that sort of thing. I think you could find someone if you had your mind to it. Do you want me to go out and find someone else to sleep with? Just checking. For your information, I was celibate for 18 months before we had Boom Boom. She dipped a French fry into the pink sauce so hard it bent. I'll be fine just for the next 9. He leaned back in his chair and fixed her with a bold stare. I don't do celibacy. She was surprised at the zip of emotion that shot through her, possession, anger, and she didn't like that. She didn't like the idea of him being with other women. She stared at him, and she had to wonder if that reaction was what he was pushing for. If he was pushing to see if she would actually be okay with all this. Well, then maybe I will find someone then. How about this? I'm probably not going to be actively looking for a lover, but if one presents himself, who am I to say no? Hey, you have needs, I'm sure. Now he was just making fun of her. Do you have to be such a pain in the butt? What is it you want? Why can't you just say it? His gaze went sharp, intense, and everything inside her shivered. She wished she hadn't asked for honesty because she was sure about to get it. Now she wasn't entirely sure she wanted it. Here's what I want, he said. I want no man for other me to ever touch you again. How about that? But that's not reasonable, is it? Because this is just a temporary marriage, and you just want it to be in name only. And we need to have a relationship for the sake of our child, not based on the F word that involves nudity, according to your words, not mine. Oh, she said. She was equally surprised by how satisfying this was, that he was showing he was possessive. It went right along with the possession she had felt a moment before. This was all very weird. "That's it?" he asked. "Well, what do you want me to say?" she asked. "You're right. It's unreasonable." "And you're totally fine with other women touching me while we live together, while we have a marriage license?" "No." She bit into her French fry fiercely and chewed it with much more force than necessary. "I hate the idea about as much as I hate you, which is a lot." "What are we going to do about that? Because it seems to me that it's going to be pretty difficult for the two of us to find neutral ground. We're never neutral. You want to prevent hard feelings by us not sleeping together, but yet we've got hard feelings already. If there's another lover in play, neither of us is going to be nice, and you know it." "We can't make it worse," she said, feeling desperate and a little bleak. "And we should. We could. It seems obvious to me that, look at us now. We're just a couple of, I don't know, just a few times it's already an issue, and we can't do that to the kid." "We could," he said, his tone horrendously pragmatic. She wanted to punch him. "Plenty of people do." I know," he said, something in his gaze shifted. "This is my only chance to do it right. I didn't intend to ever have this opportunity to do it again." "I can't imagine," she said, her heart squeezing. "I really can't imagine how it felt to find out I was pregnant, because I was terrified, and it wasn't like I had completely positive emotions. I didn't. But when I felt conviction, I knew I was having this baby is what I want." He shook his head. "I didn't know. When she told me she was pregnant, I was terrified too. I was 16. I wasn't ready to be a father, but I knew what I would do. I knew I'd be there for her, that I'd be there for the baby, even if it felt scary." And then suddenly the whole story changed. She acted like she didn't know me. She acted like we never slept together. It was losing the opportunity to be a father that made me realize how much I wanted it. But even then, I didn't really know that I was a kid. There was a part of me that was relieved that I didn't have to change my life at all. And dang, there's a lot of guilt that goes with that. She nodded slowly. "I can imagine that there is. But I've seen him over the years, so there's never been an opportunity to really forget what I'm missing, what I don't have." His voice was rough. "I just can't get over the feeling of a piece of myself got stolen. It's just out there in the world walking around. And sometimes I ask if it can just be enough to be that he's happy, because all the rest of it is just selfish, I guess. He's got a dad, he's got a family, he's not missing anything because I'm not in his life." "That's not true," Wren said. "He doesn't have you." She was treated to a rueful, lopsided smile. "That's weird that you would think not having me is a deficit, Wren." "Well, what I mean is, Creed, if I didn't think that you would be a good father, I wouldn't have bothered to try and include you in our baby's life." "Maybe that's the thing," he said. "Maybe she just didn't think that I would be a good father. She was 16. I imagined it was more than she didn't think, at least not about anything much deeper than herself," which was probably true. "We'll do this right," Wren said. He nodded. "So what do we do about the two of us?" "Well, we have 9 months to figure out how we navigate sharing a life, because that's what we're doing. It's going to be complicated. We don't need complications. I'll tell you what, no relationship for either of us for 9 months." He grimaced. "All right." "Sorry, get used to being alone with yourself," he snorted. "In more ways than one, it's like being 16 again. The fact of the matter is, we have got to find a better way to deal with each other than we have been, and we really do. So we certainly don't have room for anyone else in this whole situation." "Fair enough." "All right," she said. She extended her hand. He looked at it. "I'm not shaking your hand." "Why not?" "Because it's not business, Wren. And it's not gonna be. You and me can't ever be just business, sweetheart." She lowered her hand. Her heart was fluttering. "I approach everything that way because of my dad." "It's okay," he said. We are who we are. We can't do much about it." "I want to do something about it, I guess. This whole figuring myself thing out is going to weave together with figuring out how we can be a family." She would never have thought that she would become family with Creed Cooper, but here she was. "I guess so." "Well," she looked down at her cleared plate, "I guess that's it for now. For now. The wedding will be in 3 days. Are you going to invite your family?" "Hell no," he said. "Just you and me." "Don't we have to have a witness?" "Bring your sister." "Okay." She stood up, and the two of them walked to the counter. Creed paid the bill. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "You're feeding my baby." She looked around, feeling a little embarrassed. It wasn't like they wouldn't be able to hide that in the upcoming months. "I guess it really can't be a secret, can it?" "Why does it have to be?" "It doesn't," she said. He had been treated like a secret before, and Wren wasn't about to do that to him, but Louisa had done. Wren couldn't hate Louisa for it, though she'd been 16. Who hadn't done a host of stupid things when they were 16? It was just that when Wren had done stupid things, they affected someone else for the rest of their life. "It really doesn't," she affirmed. The two of them walked out of the restaurant together and engaged. It was so strange, because just a few weeks ago Wren had the sense of being on a different path from the one she'd been on before, but she hadn't imagined the path would lead here. But this was one of those moments where she had to change. And it was actually a good thing, because she needed a change anyway. The only way to handle all this change was to keep going. So that was what she would do. The fact that had to keep going with Creed, though, well, they would figure it out. They had no other choice. Whew, we're making progress. Much more progress than I did when I first read this book on my own. So let's do the wedding day time now. Get your tissues out, but don't cry. Not until the end of the book. So it was his wedding day, and he hadn't even imagined a wedding day. Hadn't even figured that he would ever get hitched. But then what he'd said to Wren at the diner had been true. He never planned on being in a situation where he got a do-over, to the biggest regret of his life. A slug of something hard hit him in the gut. It wasn't really a do-over, because it wouldn't give him time back with his son whose name he couldn't even think. Because it wasn't a name he would have given to his kid, and it served as a reminder of all the ways in which Creed was not a part of his son's life. But that did not matter. Today Creed was going to make sure that he never missed out again, and the more he thought about it over the last few days, the firmer conclusion he'd come to. Sure, he could understand where Wren was coming from, and she had the idea that they might be able to exist in a middle ground, and that middle ground would be better than trying and failing at having a marriage. If he decided to make a marriage, then he was going to make it. There would be no living separately, no other relationship, no amicable divorce when the year was up. He wanted to be in the child's life. He didn't want to have regrets. A real marriage was the simplest way to the path that he could think of. He would talk to her later, after the wedding night. As it was, he'd gone all dressed up for the occasion, because she liked it so much when he dressed up for the winery event. So he was sure that she would like this. She said she would meet him at the courthouse. He assumed that she was driving there with her sister. And when he arrived, Wren was standing in front of a red brick building, wearing a simple white dress that just fell past her knees. On the other side of her were her sisters. Her mother was there too, looking pale and drawn. "Well, I didn't realize the whole family would be joining us," he said. Wren grinned at him and then took a hold of his arm, leading them ahead of the sisters and the mom. "I had to bring them all," she said. "They don't know the whole situation." "Meaning?" "They don't know that it's temporary." He nearly said right there that she didn't seem to realize that temporary was off the table, but he decided to save that for after the vows. Instead, he bent down and brushed a kiss across her cheek. The action sent a slug of lust straight down to his gut. She turned to face him. Her eyes were wide. "You look beautiful," he said. He heard a rustle of whispers behind him, and he gave her a knowing look. "Thank you. So do you." He knew she wasn't lying. She did think he looked good. The heat between them was real. It was all way too real. Her mother looked between them. "I do wish we would have had a real wedding." "You know why we had to do this quickly," Wren said. "Nobody cares any more if a woman's pregnant at her wedding, or if they had a baby in attendance," her mother replied. "I care," Wren said. "I was impatient," he said. "I just couldn't wait." "Indeed," her older sister Emerson said, looking him in the eye with coolness. "You don't approve of me?" he asked. "I'm deeply suspicious of you, but then I would be deeply suspicious of anyone marrying my sister. I hear tell that your husband is a pretty suspicious character, too." And Wren did her sworn sisterly duty by being skeptical of him. Well, that was fair enough. Isn't this a good book? Hold on, I gotta turn the page. It was the youngest sister, Cricket, who gave him the kind of open, assessing look that made him feel actual guilt. "You had better be good to her. Our father was terrible, and Wren deserves to be happy." "I'll be good to her," he said. He would be. Her happiness mattered, he told himself. It only mattered because of their baby, but somehow he suspected it was more. "Good," Cricket said, "because if you aren't, I'll hunt you down and I'll kill you." She said it cheerfully enough that he suspected she wasn't being hyperbolic. They all filled the courtroom, and then he and Wren took their position up near the judge's bench. They exchanged brief pleasantries with the woman before getting down to business. It was quick, surprisingly quick. Pledging his life to another person, when the ceremony was stripped away, a wedding was just a business deal where you hold hands. Wren's voice trembled on the part about staying together until death separated them. His own didn't, but maybe that was because he didn't feel like he was lying. He felt as committed as he could to her. Maybe it was that simple for him because he didn't have other dreams of love, marriage, or anything of the kind. He imagined that Wren, on some level, dreamed of the romance most women did, he assumed. He wondered what his sister would say if he leveled this theory at her. She probably would bite him. Honey didn't like to be what anyone expected, and she would be also annoyed for him having the wedding and not inviting her. Probably she would be irritated at him for not telling her that he was going to be a father, but Honey was a problem that would have to wait. You may kiss the bride, the judge said, and this was the part that Creed had been waiting for. He wrapped his arms around Wren, pulled her against him, and they looked in each other's eyes, which was one of shock, as if she hadn't realized they would be expected to do this, as if she hadn't realized that whether a wedding was permanent or not, in a courthouse or not, if you were trying to pass it off as something real to your family, you were going to have to kiss. So they did. If everything he remembered, her mouth was so soft and sweet, she was a revelation, Wren Maxfield. And he tried to remember what it had been like when he wanted to punish her with his passion. That wasn't what he wanted now. No, now he wanted something altogether else. A strange need twisted and turned inside him upside down, inside out, until he couldn't recognize it or himself. He might not know exactly what was happening to him, but he knew desire, and desire flared between them whenever they touched, no question about it. When they parted, her family was staring at them open-mouthed. He shrugged. There's a reason we had to get married so quickly. That earned him a slug on the shoulder. Wren looked disheveled and furious, and he wondered if he had the record for a husband who got punched soonest after the vows were spoken. When it was over, they went to the truck and sat there in silence, ballooned between them. I thought you were going to involve your family, he asked. Or you weren't going to involve your family, he asked. I didn't know what else to tell them. I didn't want them to think I was getting married to you just because of a legal thing. It felt stupid. And then it snowballed. Wren, so I can come to your house for just a little bit? She was making this whole seduction plan a hell of a lot easier than he had even expected. He had thought that he would have to contrive a way to get her to spend their wedding night together, but it turned out she walked right into the situation where she was going to have to do it anyway. Gee, I can think of something for us to do. Creed, you can't deny that it's real between us, Wren. Whatever else the desire is between us is real. Okay. We're going to stop here at page 127 for the night, but we'll pick it up tomorrow. But we've got a little bit more to go. We're at page 124 right now. Wren stared at her new husband. She had to wonder if all the time she had simply been lying to herself by increments, stages, and degrees, lying to herself that they could be together and not be together, that they could somehow have a platonic relationship that wouldn't be affected if the other one ended up with a different partner, that they could be friends and just keep everything easy for their kid. But she realized now that perhaps this real issue in her parents' marriage had been honesty. And maybe it wasn't even honesty with each other, but honesty with themselves. Wren didn't really know how to be honest with herself. That was the thing. The realization shocked her about as much as anything else that had since she started this thing with Creed, about as much as their kiss at the altar, and as much as how real the vows had felt. It had just so different from how she had imagined. He was different from how she had imagined. They were different together. Take me home, she said softly, and he did. The truck had moved quickly around the curves as he maneuvered it expertly along the rural road. Did you ever want to do anything but work at the family winery? She asked. His eyes were glued at the road as he drove. I have my ranch, not a huge operation, because of course I'm tied up a lot of the time with the cowboy wines, but I found my way to do what I want and what I feel like my responsibility is. So it feels like a responsibility to you? Yes, it does, and more so in the years since my mom died. Her heart went tight. I'm so sorry about your mother. I'm sorry about your dad, he said. I know I wasn't very nice about it before. I'm not proud of what I said, Wren, but sometimes I get my head buried in the sand. I turned your family into an enemy because you were competition and because I was pouring myself into making our winery better since my mom died. I felt like I was on some crusade to make my dad interested in my life. I lost sight of some things, but I'm good at that. I'm good at losing sight of things, sometimes intentionally. Does that have to do with my son? Yes. Trying to ignore the pain certainly didn't improve my disposition, let's put it that way. And it's a wound that will hurt worse as the older I get, the more I realize what I missed, what I can't get back. Kids always make you aware of the time, how it passes, and I understand it. Mine comes with accompanying grief and regret. She could see that, how that would work. At 16, everyone was short on perspective and long on time, but at their age, That's when a person realized how precious it all was, and that feeling only increased with years, the desire to hang on to what was important. Of course, she wasn't sure it was age that had given her that perspective. You know, losing my relationship with my father the way I did is what forced me to look at my life more critically. Ren said it's what forced me to ask myself why I was doing anything. I think it's what made me feel ready for the baby, but even with those changes, there are so many things I still don't know how to navigate, so many things I'm not sure about, because all these revelations are so very well new, she looked at him, people like to be comfortable, don't we? We don't want change, and we usually don't, and usually life doesn't ask if we want to go through things that are most define us, we just have to go through them. I'm sure that losing your dad the way you did is a lot like losing my mom. She shook her head. No, you can't see your mom anymore. I don't want to see my dad. It's a lost creed. But I wouldn't compare the two. My dad was never who I thought he was. His truck pulled to a long gravel driveway that led to the ranch. His house was so different from any she would have imagined herself living in. Her place at the Maxfield Vineyards was styled after the vineyard house itself, which her parents had taste. Or maybe there was just her father's taste. Maybe that's what her mother wanted and didn't come into after all. Wren didn't know. It bothered her, going from a house that had been decided on by her parents straight to a man's house. He stopped the car and looked at her. What's wrong? I've never had my own place. Not really. I don't know what it's like. I just don't know who I am. I try to think of what house I would choose, and it's just blank in my head. With that, I'm going to leave you tonight. We've got half a book left to go. So I look forward to sharing the rest of this amazing book with you tomorrow. You already know this is going to be at my top of my top wonderful list. And it's got everything in it. It's got the burning jabs. It's got the passion of desire. It's got the misunderstanding. It's got the what she went through, thinking she's not enough, to him thinking that he doesn't have any more love to give, that he can't start over from that broken relationship. He can't give the love to a child because he had a child, but yet that child was never told that he was the true biological father. So it's just a wonderful story, and I can't wait to share the rest of it with you tomorrow. So I'm going to do one song, and then we're going to call it a night.